can't see me, you Stevie. Wondering how I reach more evolutions than Evie and make it look easy.
What is up, Earth's mightiest subscribers? It's Blerd without fear. Welcome back to the channel. All right, today's video, I want to talk about Timeless #1 by Jed MacKay, Greg Land, Jay Leiston, Patch Zurcher, and Salvador LaRocca. This is a 2022 rendition of what we got last year right at the end of the year, which is basically Marvel's new way to set up the next year's events and get you all hyped up and ready for everything Marvel has planned over the next year, which 2023 looks to be a pretty huge year for Marvel, considering that we're already going to be kicking off January with what is already kind of touted to be the next big thing going on in X-Men with Sins of Sinister, a story arc that many at Marvel have hinted at as being Mr. Sinister's version of Age of Apocalypse, which is one of the biggest X-Men story arcs of all time. We also know other crazy things are going to be going on in the X-Men's corner of the Marvel Comics universe regarding characters like Beast and Wolverine. We also, speaking of X-Men, know that Emma Frost is going to be appearing in Jerry Duggan's recently relaunched Invincible Iron Man series. We also know that there's the Summer of Symbiotes that is well on the way, as well as Dark Web that's already in full kickoff. And of course, we know Jason Aaron's Avengers Assemble is going to be carrying on into next year as well. So this is all basically kind of a way to prime us for a lot of those things that are on the horizon. And the way that they do that is once again using Kang as a storytelling device. Kang is a character who exists and permeates himself throughout all space and time in the Marvel Comics universe. He's responsible for a lot of the big things that have ever happened and will ever happen in the Marvel Comics universe, as far as anyone can tell. And in this, we learn that there are some things even Kang the Conqueror doesn't know. We know this because there's something that he has been missing. There's the 1 second of time in existence Kang can't perceive. He can't see it, he can't hold it, he can't experience it. He keeps referring to it as the missing moment, and we don't really know what that is initially when we first hear about it, but it is something that is quickly explained to us when he encounters the Savant in a particular piece of history, the destruction of the University of Fairthon. The Savant, a character who plays a small yet not insignificant role in Kang's future going forward. This Savant knows exactly what the missing moment is. He tells us that it is a moment that is the starting point of a journey towards the greatest prize in all of history. And Kang, being a guy who is deeply and intimately connected to the passage of time, of course, he would want something of this magnitude, but he can't have it because this is something that can only be obtained by heroes, not villains. Villains would never know how to start this journey, but heroes actually do. And Kang is no hero, so he wouldn't know how to do this, and the Savant whispers the secrets of this in Kang's ear, and much to Kang's horror, he realizes he can never have what it is he truly wants. He knows that this thing is out of his reach, but that's not going to stop him from trying to get what he wants. There's even something that's brought up that's referred to as tribulation events, which initially to me sounded like major moments in the Marvel Comics, upcoming 2023 slate that were given vague names to hide what they truly were. I don't really think that's the case because we see these events take place in this issue and they're pretty much what they were advertised. We see references to the Death Moon, the fall of the Impossible City, the King of Magic, and the cannibal culture. However, I'm still willing to believe there is something a little bit more to these, considering there's just too many similarities going on right now. I could easily see the Death Moon being a reference to the not Death Star that Beast has created in the background without anyone on Krakoa's knowledge, up until recently, that is. There's also the fall of the Impossible City. That city could very easily be a reference to Krakoa itself. Krakoa is in a lot of ways an impossible city. It's a city that is a mutant-only city on a living mutant island, where all mutants get to live in peace and prosperity with little to no interference from humankind. That sounds pretty impossible. We can also bring up the King of Magic, which technically could be an allusion to the return of Doctor Strange as the Sorcerer Supreme, who, might I remind you, all of that is being overseen by Jed MacKay, who writes this issue. And when you get to the cannibal culture, Not really sure what that is. That maybe that could be a reference to the Summer of Symbiotes, which is very Carnage centric. I don't really know. But getting away from that, all of this introduces us to what is going to be Kang's new arch nemesis in the Marvel Comics universe. For the longest time, it was the character Immortus, a variant of Kang where the two of them had become so divergent from one another, they had become entirely different people. It was always Kang's goal to never become Immortus, and Immortus just always liked messing with Kang and stopping him from doing whatever it was he was trying to do. And Immortus, while technically not the most super villain of supervillains, he's a more heroic version of Kang, if for no other reason than he's helped the Avengers more often than Kang has, even if it was to serve his own purposes. But this new villain, someone who refers to themselves as Murden, which is a reference to the mythical figure Merlin, and if that weren't obvious enough, this Murden is also flanked by what he refers to as his court, or his round table. All of these various and sundry characters who have been genetically engineered to be the next superheroes to save the universe, each of them being named and modeled after other mythical figures from King Arthur's court, with more obvious characters like Arthur, Lancelot, Parsifal, and Mordred being very clear references to King Arthur and King Arthur's court and the Knights of the Round Table, whereas some other ones may not be quite as obvious. Names like Galahad, or basically Galahad. Berserk is also in reference to Gawain, the Green Knight. And while Bedivere is actually a pretty obvious reference, a lot of people who aren't familiar with the legend of King Arthur typically don't tend to exactly remember the character of Bedivere. Each of these characters is genetically engineered to take on the biggest threats in the Marvel Comics universe, and for the most part are able to hang with Kang. Granted, Kang is still able to defeat them, but the idea of this is more just showing how far Murden's influence goes. Murden seems to know so many things about Kang. He knows his strengths, he knows his weaknesses, he knows his security codes to bypass all of his different protocols that would keep anyone from infiltrating his secret bases or overriding any of his weapons. He also knows what Kang is going to do and where he's going to be before even Kang knows. Throughout this entire issue, Murden has his Knights of the Round bird dogging Kang throughout space and time. No matter where Kang goes, he always seems to run into one of the Knights of the Round Table, each one stating that, oh yeah, Murden said you would be here. And they are always there before Kang even gets there. The question now becomes, is Murden some variant of Kang? That is something that did initially cross my mind, because one of the first things that I thought about was, what if this is another variant? What if this is a divergent version of Kang and it's not really that hard to believe, as it stated at the beginning of this issue, that when Kang was talking about the massacre at the University of Earthen, he thought it was such a terrible thing, only to later realize that in the future, he would be the person who destroyed that university. It was him. He just didn't know it at the time because he hadn't become that version of himself yet. We know that he has carried other guises and disguises throughout history, even in his earliest goings, all the way back to his first appearance in Avengers number 8 in 1964. He would later show up as Immortus just 2 or 3 issues later, and we had also seen him in the Fantastic Four as Rama Tut. He has been so many different versions of himself that a lot of the times some of these characters can just as easily be entirely different entities that aren't Kang. And I could easily see Murden being something along those lines, being a Immortus style figure, someone who has changed enough that they're no longer technically Kang. Now, another character it could be incredibly obvious. It could just as easily be the actual Merlin. For those that don't know, Merlin is actually a character in Marvel Comics. He typically exists in Otherworld. We recently saw him in Teenie Howard's Excalibur, as well as I believe even in the Knights of X or Knights of 10 series that followed shortly after, that he was engaging in a sort of cold war between himself and Opal Luna Saturnine to regain his position as being the Omniversal Guardian. So it's not that far out of the realm of the possibility that this could potentially be the actual Merlin. Some of the things that we see occur in this issue regarding Murden harken back to appearances Murden Merlin had made in the Hulk comic UK series. It was an old series of black and white comics that, while they were called Hulk comics, they often featured stories that weren't just about the Hulk. They usually featured characters like the Eternals, as well as Captain Britain and the Black Knight and Ant-Man. And Merlin used to make regular appearances in a lot of those issues, and a lot of the things we see, like where we see Merlin playing with chess pieces and manipulating things, it all harkens back to things we've seen Merlin do in those comics. We see at a point where he's manipulating figures on a chessboard, one of which is Dr. Doom, another that is Ultron, one that looks vaguely like the Super Skrull, and one that could be Mr. Sinister, all of which could very easily wind up being major players in the future of Marvel Comics in 2023. Now, once again, I'm not necessarily 100% sold on the idea that it is the real true Merlin. I'm gonna hang my hat on the idea that this is just another variant of Kang who has become divergent enough from Kang to have an entirely new and alternate persona, and I get this impression that maybe that persona is Merlin. I think this is in fact a new Kang who just goes by a different name. It would just explain why he knows exactly everything there is to know about Kang and things that Kang is going to do before he even does them. Maybe this is a future version of Kang that the current Kang has yet to become. We've seen something similar to this in Al Ewing and Ram V's Venom series, where Eddie Brock has multiple versions of himself that he is fated to become, with one of them being Meridius. And once again, not even a variant of Eddie. It is literally what Eddie will become in the future, but he exists in a space and time where he can coexist with Eddie at the same place in the same time. I could easily see this being the same thing they do with Kang. As for everything else we see in this, just like with the previous issue of Timeless, we see a lot of setup for the future of Marvel Comics. At one point, we see Tony struggling with alcoholism, as he is doing currently in Jerry Duggan's Invincible Iron Man series, and it being locked behind bars, which also kind of tracks considering some of the things that have recently happened to him. And him shaking hands with a character who I'm not terribly familiar with, but I could very easily see a connection between this character and what's going on with Tony and his beef with Fei Long, one of Jerry Duggan's recent additions to the X-Men's Rogues Gallery, who also happens to be beefing with Iron Man right now. We see the X-Men's Treehouse headquarters in New York burning to a cinder, and people down below seemingly cheering it on. We also see Beast surrounded by what seems to be a clone army of even more Hank McCoys. And of course, we also see Doctor Strange seemingly bending reality, which is supposed to be a major portion of his return to Marvel Comics following the death of Doctor Strange. We also see hints at the upcoming Black Panther issue, Black Panther number 13, where it's already kind of been stated that Black Panther's creating his own Avenger squad to take on his former best friend Jai, but we also know that in the 13th issue, he's going to be reuniting with Prince Namor, who has recently rejoined the Avengers himself. We also see the return of the Pet Avengers. I don't really know what's going on there, but just know the Pet Avengers are back. We also see that Wolverine is seemingly possessed by the Spirit of Vengeance. This one isn't that much of a reach because in Benjamin Percy's current Ghost Rider series, Wolverine is actually factored in quite heavily recently, so it's not really that much of a surprise that he's hanging around with Ghost Rider. I guess the him becoming the Spirit of Vengeance part is kind of weird, but just saying, the idea of Wolverine hanging out with Ghost Rider, not really that uncommon of an idea considering these characters actually have a pretty deep history with one another. We also see Captain Marvel seemingly becoming a Brood, which is also not entirely surprising considering what's going on in the Captain Marvel comics right now. Right now, there is a crossover going on between the X-Men and Captain Marvel, where Rogue has already been infected by the Brood, I believe, as of one of the most recent issues of Captain Marvel, and the rest of the team, as well as Captain Marvel, are trying to stop it. We also see the Mr. Peacock character, a guy who still, as of this moment, has no name, who is the leader of Xeno in the Benjamin Percy X-Force series, the mutant hate group that has been bird-dogging the team and Krakoa and mutants since House of X ended. We see him staring at what looks eerily like a Krakoan egg. We know that Xeno has been co-opting and learning more about all of the different tech and things that the Krakoa has come up with, so it wouldn't surprise me if they found some kind of a way to manipulate and create their own Krakoan eggs. That wouldn't surprise me in the slightest. Some of these other teases that we see are things we've already seen or known about. Things like Luke Cage being mayor of New York, but maybe a bigger focus on his candidacy and the issues he must face on a daily basis, because once again, he has already been mayor of New York for the past several months. We see what is also obviously a reference to Sins of Sinister with a Nightcrawler version of Spider-Man. We also see Bishop in his upcoming series where he'll be training the next generation of Krakoan defenders. That new series will be coming in February, and hopefully we'll learn more about the roster of characters that Bishop is going to have at his disposal, because it kind of looks like just a bunch of random and alternate versions of X-Men we've already seen. I'm hoping that it goes way deeper than that. Let's see, we also see the return of Red Goblin, which for those who are unfamiliar was Norman Osborn with a piece of the Carnage symbiote. We recently saw Normie Osborn, Norman Osborn's grandson, recently reconnect with the Goblin Child symbiote, which was spawned from that piece of the Carnage symbiote. Maybe Norman gets it back. Maybe little Normie gets an upgrade. It's hard to say at this point, but I wouldn't be surprised by either, though I'm kind of hoping that Norman stays away from the Red Goblin symbiote because I kind of like him as the Gold Goblin right now. And we also see teases of Mary Jane becoming the new Quotey Fingers Jackpot, which I don't think she's actually been called that yet, but there was already previously a character named Jackpot who a lot of people thought was Mary Jane back during the Dan Slott run, and that turned out not to be the case. But right now, for those who have not been keeping up, in Dark Web, Mary Jane and Black Cat #1, it was recently revealed that Mary Jane has superpowers now. They're powers that are on a roulette, that she just gets random powers whenever she tries to use them. In that first issue, we saw her wielding a flaming sword and shooting energy beams from her hands, and then later she ended up getting a bad roll, and she wound up having the power and consistency of pudding. Yeah, I know, it sounds pretty damn dumb, but who knows? We'll just have to wait and see what happens with that. But we've already kind of seen, once again, the fruits of these things already occurring, which makes me wonder if Timeless was supposed to come out maybe a little bit earlier, or if some of these issues are supposed to come out a little later. Who knows? But I am curious to see where all of this is going to go. Kang slipping and dipping through time kind of shows us all of these various and sundry teases. And once again, while I don't think a lot of this stuff is everything we're going to see coming in 2023, I think it's just going to be everything we see coming at the beginning of 2023, because this is all stuff that honestly is either going on right now or is about to happen. Either way, I'm interested to see what happens with Kang in this, because the character I talked about earlier, Murden, does in fact mortally wound Kang. And Kang himself even says he is in fact dying, but protocols he's put in place have pushed him into this, what he refers to as null time. So basically, he has an opportunity to use his dying breath to try and make something happen. So now that Murden has all of his heroes that he's put together to try and help him discover the missing moment, something that he's trying to deny Kang and keep for himself, even though it does seem kind of weird that he wants it, because he does refer to himself as not really being a hero, even though he calls himself a hero in front of the Round Table. The Round Table doesn't really seem to know whether or not they can trust him now, because Kang has kind of told them that this is all just a game, a ruse, that Murden is lying to them. So obviously that is the case, and we later see that, yeah, he wants to remove all the supervillains off the table so that he can just come and run roughshod over the Marvel Comics universe. So yeah, it makes me wonder, he's just obviously using the Round Table to get the missing moment because they are in fact heroes and he isn't. It makes me wonder exactly what the hell this is and what it is exactly he plans to do with it. We don't really ever learn anything about what the ultimate prize is. I got a feeling it's something we'll have to just wait to see later on, if and when it comes up. But if it's something that no hero would technically seek out, but a supervillain would actually want, it has to be something pretty substantial. And for someone to wield power similar to Kang to desire it that badly, yeah, it's got to be something big. And as far as like what team Kang is going to put together to try and thwart Murden in his final moments, I kind of feel like we're just going to wind up kind of digging more into Avengers shenanigans. I don't think we're going to see some brand new team we've never seen before, much less new characters we've never seen before. I think it's just going to be the usual suspects who we're used to seeing, but I wonder if it's going to wind up being some book that comes out later on that's kind of in in the same vein of those like Avengers No Road Home, or so on and so forth. There were like Avengers standalone events that technically happened in the main continuity but just were separate from the main Avengers books. I wonder maybe if it's going to tie into Avengers Assemble in some way, shape, form, or fashion, even though technically Jason Aaron's kind of walking away from that title here pretty soon after 5 years. But yeah, I don't really know where that's going to go. A lot of this stuff honestly is quite confusing. I don't really 100% get it all, but I think that's kind of why I'm interested. You want to keep up with my coverage of my favorite Marvel comics, as well as other comics that I also enjoy from other imprints. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and tap that bell so you get notifications on every video. And on your way out, make sure to Hulk smash that like button and, share it all over the internet. Really helps the channel out. In the meantime, let me know what you thought about Timeless #1 2022 edition. Keep it plus ultra and sound off in the comments.